I wanted to explore a phenomena that can happen around dissociation and trauma and look at it graphically. We come in as a circle. We come in as a sphere. We come in whole with so much potential. And the culture creates boundaries. And these are the acceptable areas of the sphere that remain. And these are the areas that are the potential, the probable human personas that are extinguished. So we already come down by a good 70% with this cultural framing. But then there are splits within the cult. There are things that are secret within the cult itself, that are secret that they're secret. So the cult doesn't consciously split them off. If you say, do you want to have sexual abuse of children? Everyone will say no. But then you will watch a complex pattern of creating and allowing that ensures that there will be sexual abuse of children, and then subsequently ensures that nobody will know about it, and then subsequently ensures that nobody will know that nobody knows about it. And these are triple-walled partitions, meaning they're presumably within the cult, and we deal with them somewhat reluctantly on a statistical basis. But we don't deal with them on a daily interactive basis. And so now we're down an additional 20 to 50% within the cult box. And then there are lies and betrayals. That we agree not to look at, that other people don't tell us, that we agree not to investigate. There's a flow pattern within the cult that, people say, hey, I've got to work a bit late tonight, and it's forbidden within the cult to say why, or I'll join you at work, or anything is forbidden. And as you try and push into that barrier, you realize that the wall is thicker and thicker. As someone becomes more panicky or more hostile, and either you grace the situation over to accommodate their charge of fear or rage and go along with the lie, or you discover and shatter the illusion. And everyone is facilitating the illusion. Then you also have false falsehoods, where strangers and various scapegoats get projected on. And you end up in this little area right here. And it's in this area where we are conscious. We can move within the sphere of public interest within this grid here. Now, within this framework, we have a few corners chopped off by regulation and, limitations and money and stuff, but we now exist in this box. Now, what happens is you can see we're ending up with maybe 15% of the psyche within the conscious domain. What happens is that the cult of culture influences us in the seeking for conformity and belonging to behave in a way that seems consistent somewhat. I mean, there's a lot that isn't consistent, but it seems somewhat consistent with this part of the psyche, as we simultaneously betray and harm other parts of the psyche. And so let's take the phenomena of garbage generation as a metaphor. So as an American, you and I are going to create 102 tons of garbage. So we're this tiny little 200-pound figure, and we're going to create 102 tons of garbage, much of it that will outlast the lifetime. So this little figure is going to create all of this by turning natural resources that are part of an ecological system into man-made resources that are clashing with the natural system. And it's this process of creating waste that is fine because we have our little house and we throw the waste outside the house. And we have this little cultivated area of our psyche that is the acculturated conscious mind that is constantly butchering and betraying and harming and ignoring and banishing parts of the ecology of the rest of the psyche, is generating waste. For example, we create a relationship, we fall in love, and then we separate the partners and make up an illusion that work is more important than the relationship. Well, this produces envy. It produces frustration. It produces pent-up sexual energy because that energy is now being pulled out of the relationship. But all of that pent-up energy, all of that envy, etc., is then cast out as waste. It's like, oh no, I'm not an envious person. I'm not a scared person. I'm not a demanding person. So we cast out all of the taboo areas that are generated. In other words, we create an ecology that generates vast amounts of physical waste, which reflects a cultural ecology that generates vast amounts of emotional waste, vast amounts of biological waste, emotional waste, all the feelings we don't want to feel, mental waste, all the thoughts we don't want to own, biological waste, all of the chemical memories of all those feelings that we don't want to process those chemicals. And so what we do is we put them out here in the unconscious area of the psyche. A good way to examine or imagine the conscious and the subconscious mind is to look at this as a lake. And this little bit of a iceberg up on the top is the conscious mind, and down here is the unconscious mind. And so this conscious acculturated brain in here is constantly creating alchemical reactions with this area down here that are at odds with the conscious persona. So the more we deny, for example, our envy, created by a reality that generates envy. And what I mean by this is, if you long to do something, and then say, as we often do in our cult, and then say, well, you can't do that, but if you do all these things you don't want to do, all these things you hate, then one day you will have money. And then if you save up enough money, one day you can retire. And then once you can retire, then you can go do those things that you love. And so in that scenario, all of the bitterness, all of the frustration, all of the sadness, all of the delay around having to go about that dream in that way gets cast out of the little boxed-in area within the cult. Within the cult, everything's going well. Oh, very good, you got promoted. Oh, very good, you got a new job in marketing. Oh, very good, you did this and you did this. Isn't that wonderful? This self-referential, isn't it wonderful type phenomena is going on in here. But out here, there's more and more garbage being generated because we're throwing it there. Emotional, biological, mental garbage, like all the thoughts. Is this really the best way to express my art? Is this really, to do the exact opposite, to become a lawyer, whatever it is? And there's all this stuff that we're in conflict with, and we're throwing it out there. Now, as this is a very tiny bit of the self, and so if we keep the conscious mind happy by polluting and weighting and antagonizing and attacking and dissociating from 85% of who we are, we will eventually move into a dynamic with our own body, with our own psyche, etc., where it seems like the outer world is against us. It seems like we're in conflict with ourselves. Our bodies feel too tired to get out of bed. Our thoughts don't want to imagine another diagnostic exam. Our emotions don't want to start another relationship, to do this again and again. And eventually we move into this place where this tiny part of the self is in battle with the majority of the self. And we have this phenomenon of dread or self-sabotage, or it's like fear of ourselves, fear of the fact that the majority of who we are, of all this toxic waste that we've been throwing out there for our entire acculturated lives, that this whole pile that dwarfs our body will collapse in on the body, that all the drugs that we've taken to suppress the voices that have wanted to speak will collapse the body. And we have a crisis. And in that crisis, there is the possibility of running and dying, of, a complete collapse or schism, schism with reality, going insane, a breakdown. But there's also the possibility of a partnering dynamic. There's the possibility of having a healthy relationship with what's out there. And letting this part break down and starting to integrate the energy that has been stored in all of these denied parts of self, in all of these secrets, in all of these wounds, to let this energy start flowing through the consciousness and the energy body, the emotional and the physical body again. Expanding the box, looking for symmetry, looking for wholeness, claiming more of our truths, more of our energy, moving deeper into partnership. Because one of the biggest risks we have in this partitioned area of dissociated Western lineal consciousness is that in order to satisfy the agendas of the acculturated mind, we actively cause pain in the dissociated areas of the traumatized and unconscious mind, such that it becomes a vicious circle, such that as we start to make our return back into the larger self, that what meets us is pain and shame from our own shadow, that what meets us is a tremendous amount of grief that then leaves us fighting the process of reintegration with ourself. The grief is not something that the conscious acculturated mind can feel, but it is the harbinger that we're beginning to awaken the awareness of the parts of our conscious mind, the parts of the field of self that have been pushed away. Grief, crisis, trauma, and transcendent awakening offer the stepping stool up into this cycle of coming back into the self. And it can be one of the most dangerous and life-risking and painful processes, or one of the most beautiful and transcendent processes, depending on whether we understand that this will come. Sometime, usually after 30, in the 40s to 50s, that this terrain will come, and to step into it willingly, to prepare for it, to start to get to know these unconscious areas of the brain early through poetry, through art, through music, through travel, through long sequences of rhythmic, uninterrupted time, through a different relationship with time than the clipped, lineal routine of a 9 to 5. Time is a form of music. As we play with it this way and this way, as we play with movement and with sound, as we play with ideas and images, as we morph the edges, moving towards the synesthesia that can be pre-awakened, pre-open to, with a transcendent and initiatory psychedelic experience, an initiatory psychedelic experience that prefaces this journey, gives us a taste so that we can welcome it when we arrive there on foot, with the more arduous process of preparing the conscious mind by destructuring it, not by going insane or unconscious, but by creating additional links, because the cult is strong enough through language through language, through science. The cult is strong enough through language and science, through the technology of language, to create the distinctions necessary to go back into the circle consciously that we abandoned unconsciously to come into this cult. Every cult is a structure. Every culture is a paradigm. And it creates pain and friction because it's not complete. And it's at that intersection of a certain amount of pain and friction that we have the possibility of waking up to the whole on a conscious level, the whole inside and outside on a conscious level, and then return to it without fully losing the distinctions, the contrasts of pleasure and pain, the contrasts of finger and thumb, the contrast of red and whiter and green. These contrast points bring awareness, infuse awareness back into the whole. So if you're in trauma, you spend time reading, making videos like these, drawing, sketching, communicating, connecting the dots, learning, studying psychology, studying trauma, studying dreams. If you start connecting these paradigms, they will start to fill some of the data points in the void of possibility and empty space. And it will be these dots, these particles that represent a very tiny part of the field of reality that from that point can be extrapolated out to the space, to the silence, to the wave, giving us a sense of consciously returning to the whole of which we are a part, to the one from which we have split ourselves with the phenomena of our conscious brains, to the particle that is the individuated ego existing in a field, in an ecological field.